And next up, we have our next speaker, Tina. She's going to be talking about community organizing and party planning 101 from LadyBirds and BFF. So without further ado, let's welcome Tina on stage. I'll invite you to turn your video on and get started. Hi.
Hi, thank you guys for having me. I'll start off with a bit of an introduction. My name is Tina Survilla Lindell. I'm a sociolinguist and I work in community management and marketing. Like everybody else who works in Web3, I've got a pretty unconventional background. I started off as a sociolinguist, focusing in comic book scholarship and using comics to teach refugees English. After leaving the nonprofit sector, I found myself working in healthcare and pharmaceuticals. The one thing that medicine has in common with Web3 is it's a highly technical concept and you're dealing with a pretty naive user base. So you ask yourself questions like, how can we teach someone as much as possible, as efficiently as possible, in as little time as possible? And how do we help the maximum number of people in the minimum amount of time? So I had an easy transition into Web3 with those concepts. When I got to Web3, I entered with Truth Labs. My partner is one of the founders, so I had a very interesting experience as a naive user to see a project from behind the scenes and how it builds from there. I was a moderator with them and I slowly entered the space. I minted Crypto Coven and the marketing for that was amazing because when I came on, the space was largely for men and Crypto Coven was the first time I felt a product was marketed to me as a woman. Now, when it comes to community management, before all of those things, before I was in Web3, Web2, sociolinguistics, helping out with Moonbirds, LadyBirds, BFF, I was what I am a party person. So I grew up moving around a lot. My mom is a Filipino immigrant. My dad was in the American military. So we moved every 3 to 4 years. Something my mom did that I've carried with me throughout my whole life was whenever we got to a new location, she would seek out people like her, so other Filipinos, and then we'd have a party immediately. Parties allowed us to meet fellow members of our community, people we had like interests in common with, and after being in a new country for just a couple weeks, we'd already had childcare, study buddies, play dates, people to help us out. So when I got older, I attended parties like every other weekend. So parties are very much just part of my life. When I got into high school, I was at home, I was about 15 years old, and I decided one day I really wanted ice cream. It was a hot day, and stay with me, I know it sounds kind of silly, but we didn't have any ice cream at home. So my mom would not give me funds to get my own ice cream, but I did have permission to use her house for a party. And what I did was I invited all of my friends to have a big ice cream social. Now, kind of like token gating, in order to attend my party, so I could get ice cream and spend time with my friends, attendees had to bring their own ice cream. So just like token gating, people came to my party, they brought ice cream, they brought syrup, they brought sprinkles, they all brought something we could share, and we all had a great time. And from that point, I had an ice cream social every summer. People attended continuously. So take that concept. I want something. How can I get it? And then the reality is, if you want something, other people probably want it too. Let's see here. Sorry. So when it comes to Web3, how does that work? What does my ice cream social analogy have to do with organizing communities online? When it comes to people are simple. They want surprise, they want delight, they want connection, they want belonging. And so when I think about bringing people together and getting them to stay together, I think about parties. How do we create a medium for connection that facilitates surprise, delight, joy? And this is where party planning comes in. Most people, while I accept that maybe you didn't have a party every weekend like I did as a kid, and maybe you haven't hosted large ones, you've probably hosted some kind of event where you invited at least one person to your house or maybe a small group of people. Pretty much everyone has organized a gathering of some sort. So I like to take party planning 101 into mind when I think about community. So when we're hosting a party, we ask ourselves several questions. One, what kind of party are we having? So whether you are working from a marketing position or you're literally throwing a party, parties have a theme. So traditional parties, maybe it's a costume party, a Halloween party. When we're talking about community organizing in Web3, usually your product has to deal with maybe making your own community surrounded around an NFT. Maybe it's focused on education, mental health, investing, market analytics. You have to decide on your party theme and what's going to be what brings people together. Once you've decided on your party theme, you need to ask yourself, who am I inviting to my party? Who's my target audience? So with Web3, we ask ourselves, what is the level of comprehension for the people I'm inviting to my party? Are we talking to people who are naive about the topic? They have a lot to learn that you're going to teach them. Are we looking at people who are mid-level? They're what I call curious or skeptic. They have some information, but not all of the information. They want more information. Or are we looking at people who are very advanced in their knowledge base? So it's all about messaging and crafting the right language for whoever you're inviting. Maybe you want to cast a wide net and diversify. You have to keep that in mind when you talk about who am I inviting to my party. Next, we want to talk about venues. Where are you hosting your party? So in Web3, we ask ourselves, what platforms am I using? Are we having our party? Are we having our community meet on Discord? Are we having them meet on Twitter? Or do we use Telegram? Do we use SMS texting? Are we using all of them? Are we being multimodal with our approach? No matter what you're doing though, you have to be clear with your attendees where they're going to be able to find the most resources. So when you do choose a venue, and the difficult thing with Web3 communities is they are very decentralized. People have to know where are you going to get the consistent message. So venues, where are we hosting? I do want to share a very fun parable for my friend Alcy, who is the marketing director of Vibes over at Truth Labs, who infamously did not create a Discord for Goblin Town because she loved the fact that Goblin Town was decentralized. So you don't have to do what everyone else is doing when it comes to hosting your own party. You have to do what's right for you and right for your community. Now, once you've figured out what kind of party you're having, who you're inviting to your party, and where you're hosting your party, you have to actually ask yourself, what are we doing here? Are we just hanging out? Are we going to be providing events, recurring themes? What are we doing at your party? The thing with parties is they have to be self-sustaining once people get in the door. A good community manager will set guidelines for the party. And whether that's hosting regular games, trivia, recurrent resources, you need to decide on what are people actually going to do. So in Twitter, you might see this through weekly events. Moonbirds host parliaments on Fridays. In Discord, you're going to have different sub-channels or different groups within your community can connect and create together. Parties are all about lateral connection. People can go in any direction they want as long as they stay within the party. So you want to be able to decide on different events and what you're doing. Now, with that, we want to talk about what am I giving people at my party? Like, why are they coming here? Are we providing connection, education, career advancement? And the thing with good parties is you have to keep doing it. You can't just set it up and leave. So we have seen a lot of projects try and do that in Web3, but you got to give people a reason to get in the door and stay in the room. Community managers are being called vibe directors in some instances, and I love that term. Their responsibility is to facilitate joy, surprise, delight, and dispel fear, uncertainty, and doubt. You want to make sure people are connecting and make sure that you don't have any bad actors and that people are not feeling left out. So doing the minimal amount of work to make sure the party has the most fun. Now, when it comes to parties, to me, they are the original decentralized community. Whether you're launching a new community, breathing new life into one of your own, I hope that these guidelines, what kind of party are you having? Who are you inviting to your party? Where are you hosting it? What are you doing? I hope these can be of help when you're planning your own community. And with that, I can open the questions about my experience. You know, I have been working with Moonbirds LadyBirds, which is a not officially Proof, but they're one of the sub-parliaments. When we did that, I had joined Proof or Moonbirds after minting, and I noticed that there was a lot of chatter. I just really wanted to connect with women, and somehow found my way with Christine Wu and Shira Lazar for LadyBirds. We started hosting Twitter Spaces, and that grew into a real-life brunch at NFT NYC, where we were able to host hundreds of women together in Moonbirds and facilitating in real life connection at an in real life party from this online community is one of the highlights. With Shira Lazar, I've also worked with her to bring people together on Twitter Spaces with Alpha Mondays and Women in Web3 Wednesdays, where we've had literally thousands of attendees on our spaces, just focusing on joy and education. So
Yeah, this was great.
yeah.
Looks like there's an echo. Never mind. Thank you so much for kind of going into essentially the storytelling. I really love the analogies and also just not even analogy. There's a really nice parallelism. Maybe kind of zooming out a little bit to actually kind of think about and see how this actually applies to how we look at managing community, especially in Web3. I'd love for you to kind of talk about what your role is right now at Moonbirds and sort of how you are helping kind of that scale and kind of if you were to kind of talk about just how that community is.
To be clear, like I'm not officially an employee of Moonbirds. They have multiple sub-parliaments. LadyBirds is one of them. And so what LadyBirds is, it's a, they do approve of it. It's a DEI initiative for women in the community to connect with each other. The thing I love about Proof and how supportive they are is that they really approve of their community being decentralized. So they have these various sub-parliaments. Some of them are based off traits or mental wellness, fitness. LadyBirds is all about women connecting. And so where that actually started was right after Mint, like any other NFT project, the Discord was full of a lot of chatter. And so I saw a hole where I wasn't connecting with anybody. And so I said, okay, what is something that my identity that I connect with that I know other people do? And for me, being a woman's a big one. I like to find other women in the space. I like to seek them out and share connection. And so from there, Stevie, who's the community manager, director of culture over at Proof, brought the LadyBirds Discord to life. I worked with the LadyBirds Twitter, and now I'm part of their team. And together we were all able to bring the LadyBirds brunch together at NFT NYC. So with that, we maintain regular connection. Something exciting that we're doing as of yesterday is we actually created a community mural of all of the PFPs for the LadyBirds, whether they have a Moonbird or an oddity, into one big NFT edition of us partying together in a tree house as our Moonbirds or oddities. So literal, our connection embodied in art, which is the amazing thing about NFTs and Web3.
No, absolutely. How big is this community, and how frequently are you sort of meeting in person versus kind of obviously collaborating online?
You know, it's hard because our first time meeting in real life was at NFT NYC. LadyBirds started, it wasn't long after Mint, so it had to be late April, maybe early May, and then NFT NYC was in June. I'll be honest, I've tried to host different in real life meetups here in NYC. Another woman and I tried to host a Women in Moonbirds meetup right before the conference. And we had 5 attendees, which we still had an amazing time. It was a lot of fun, but it was very discouraging. I was like, wow, like Moonbirds is a huge 10K PFP project. There's definitely more than 5 women in New York City. So at first I was very upset, like not every party goes according to plan. And so when Proof reached out and they said they wanted to help bring an in real life event to life, I was excited, but also I was like, hey, by the way, like I had one and only 5 people came, so let's stay humble. But the demand was amazing. We booked one venue. We sold out within minutes, like I think it was 2-3 minutes, and all the tickets were gone. So that was very exciting. we had a moment of freak out, like, okay, wow, like there's a lot of people upset they can't come to this event. So we actually opened it up to the venue next door. And if I'm correct, I think we had over 300 women come to the NFT NYC brunch event. Like the venue was packed, we were shoulder to shoulder, we were able to spill into the sidewalk and the outdoor dining. So I do think there's definitely hundreds of women in the community. I don't know if it exceeds 1,000 or maybe more, at least as far as active members. But that's one of the most wonderful things about that experience is even I was surprised at the connections I was helping to facilitate. And I think that's one of the most amazing things about being a community manager. I try to keep the bar low for myself. I try my best. I always give it 100%, but I always prepare myself for maybe it doesn't work out. And when things are amazing, it makes it all the better. And that's one of the joys of working in community. You really never know how people will surprise you. So you just do your best to keep surprising them.
And hopefully these are the good kind of surprises. But you also kind of mentioned at the beginning that you came from a very kind of different background. It was very adjacent to what I would say kind of the Web3 kind of the tech sort of pipeline looks like. Science is kind of a separate, different realm. What kind of were things that either you were delighted with or you thought are kind of unique in a good or bad way that I feel like you can maybe talk about, and how was that transition?
So as far as the transition, I was working in medicine. I started off as like a medical assistant. And the thing with healthcare that the parallel with Web3 is very uncanny is you really don't have that much time with the people you're working with. So you want to be able to teach them absolutely as much as possible in the minimum amount of time. So there was a practice I joined. It's a small office. We had one physician. And we were a boutique practice, so we only dealt with like celebrities, politicians, heads of church and state, very intelligent, often intimidating, but also delightful people. But when I came in, nobody in the office was technology savvy. We were spending way too long with people, even to the point of their frustration. Like when you're teaching someone and they're not getting it, and they're busy and they gotta go, it's frustrating for everyone involved. So when I came into this practice, and this is kind of my wheelhouse for sociolinguistics, writing, and marketing. I came in, I reworked how we communicate with patients. I created protocols that drafted all the education with one click. We had some really great software programs, used internal analytics to see how much time we were spending with people doing certain things. And just by putting in a little work in, a little bit more writing, a little bit of software help, we were able to double the number of patients we helped in a day, without really taking away from their experience and letting them continue on their way. How that relates to Web3 is we have people who are scrolling on their phones most of the time. A lot of the time when we have people, they're not sitting on their desktop at all times with multiple browsers, with like analytics on one screen and Discord on the other. Sometimes they are, but not always. So the challenge is, how do we capture people? How do we get them to come to our party? And so the challenge with people who work in community roles in particular is you really do need to be technically minded and understand the products that you're working with and take that very high level, difficult information and make it as easy to understand as possible. How can I say the most with the least words? How can I teach the most with the least amount of time? And so the thing I see is, yeah.
I was just going to say, I mean, do you feel like it's the same playbook that you can apply for building communities offline versus online? Or like, of course, they have shared elements, but I guess I'm noticing things that sort of apply largely to a lot of the IRL groups. But how do you kind of think about fostering that for Web3, where by default, you have so many people that are mostly online and in different parts of the world?
So when it comes to organizing online, I think my first online community I organized, I was actually 12 years old, 20 years ago. There's this platform called Freewebs. So it was post-GeoCities and pre-MySpace. So we're aging ourselves here to all their cool Gen Zers. But the first community I ever organized, so this is pre-Web3, but the concepts are very much the same. I had these friends who were in a punk band, and I wanted to connect with other people who liked their punk band. So I made a music fan page, and there was a guest book there. And I noticed the guest book was getting a little stale. And just like when you're meeting new people in real life, sometimes parties die down and no one's talking and it's awkward. So whether it's a quiet Discord, this quiet guest book on freewebs.com, or no one is hanging out at your in real life event, the party planner, the community manager has to come in and say, okay, how do I fix this problem? How do we bring life back into this? And so I actually went to this guest book, 12 years old, 13, and started making fake accounts and had little comedy bits. I was like a crazy fangirl. I was like an angry agent. And people came to the guest book, and this is 2002. We had AOL Instant Messenger. This was not a normal activation people experienced. And they're like, what in the world is this? And this is like pre-catfish. So people would come back into this, they'd start talking, and then they would even bring those conversations like offline when we came to school. And performance art, what I was doing then with making these fake personalities, we actually see that a lot in Web3, whether it's people being themselves and activating games within their Discord or Twitter. We see a lot of interactive puzzles from different communities. It's something I really love from working alongside Truth. They're really big into what they call their lobsters or puzzle solvers. Or we see a lot of projects who bring characters from their media and have storylines crafted around them. And so I think about Web3, like, while a lot of the products are different, when it comes to people like to connect in the same ways no matter where they're at. Web2, Web3, online, in real life, the social psychology of people is largely the same. And so I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you're overcomplicating it. If you're like making very wide, crazy strategies. I think if you approach people with fun, simplicity, joy, if you take away all the FUD that they're already dealing with, especially in a bear market when our portfolios are bad, you got to get something people good to connect over and connect with.
And I mean, that's an interesting point too, right? Because my next question was just, okay, how do you think about actually maintaining that momentum and excitement when either the hype's down or there's been some market shift? Like, people obviously do react and sometimes strongly to these types of events, but how do you sort of make them more resilient to this as part of being together as a group?
So I think, especially in these communities where investing is a large reason why people have come to your party, quote unquote, it's important that community managers work with the leadership on their team to craft brand aligned messaging. That's more of a traditional marketing approach. So when it comes to FUD, when it comes to markets being down bad, that goes into our public relations damage control category. When it comes to people being upset, community managers need to be careful and not to promise too much. I'm very big into with my time in medicine, legally compliant language. Like, I've spent a lot of time in compliance. They are horribly boring meetings. Like, I'm not into them, but they are very important that we keep in mind that you are also honest, transparent with your users as much as you can be. You can't always be, especially when you have surprises coming down the line that you can't communicate publicly, but you do want to be honest and transparent as much as you can. That's actually a very interesting thing about Web3 is, I think in Web2, people could slide by with like very light messaging, like, yeah, we'll be fine. People in Web3, they want action items. They want them now. Like, if something's going on, they could have, their portfolio go down, and 20 minutes later, before anyone can really do anything actionable, they're like, what are we doing? Like, and that is a frustration point for everyone, is the instant gratification, because solutions do take more than 20 minutes. And so that goes back to aligning on messaging with your team and making sure you're communicating fairly, honestly, transparently as much as you can.
Maybe kind of one last question to sort of make sure we take the actionable pieces here. What would your advice be to a lot of these communities, whether they're trying to grow IRL or online, to actively figure out how do they actually grow and get more people involved?
My simplest question I ask myself, because before we are community managers, we're community members. I ask myself, what do I want? And this goes back to my ice cream social analogy. What do I want? And how do I give it to myself and give it to other people? And you really need to find the simplest solution to that question. So when you want more people to come into your Discord, your Twitter, you want them to buy your NFT, give them what you're looking for yourself.
That's simple and to the point. So this is great.
The hardest things are always the simplest.
Yeah.
simplest.
Well, Tina, I really appreciate this insightful conversation. And thank you so much for talking about kind of your background and sharing as valuable things that you've seen have worked.
Thank you, ETH Global, for having me. This is a delight.